This is Viterbi Voices, your chance to hear stories about research, classes, student life, and more.
Directly from our students, faculty, and other members of our engineering community. All right here at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Viterbi Voices. My name is Paul Ledesma, Director of Undergraduate Admission here at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering.
And my name is Audrey Roberts. I'm a senior studying mechanical engineering here at USC.
Well, we are back with our final episode of faculty roundtables that we did earlier this year. This is the faculty roundtable for the Mork Family Department of Chemical Engineering and Materials Science. This is a really, really fun conversation with faculty from the Mork Family Department. We have Dr. Andrea Armani, and we have Dr. Andrea Hodge, and we have Dr. Wayne Zeno, who's a brand new faculty member here at the USC Viterbi School. And this is a cool conversation because if you're interested in chemistry and you have the ideas of like what you want to do with chemical engineering, I really want you to listen all the way through on this because it talks about this incredibly broad discipline of chemical engineering and also kind of narrows in on what you can do with it. And when we get into the Q&A feature, there's a lot of great questions on like, which of these specializations is best for me? Because I think when students are looking at chemical engineering and material science, it's sometimes more confusing than it is helpful because there's so many areas of emphasis. There's sustainable energy, there's petroleum engineering, there's polymers material science, there's nanotechnology, there's a biochemical engineering emphasis. And even as I go through them, I get confused. Here's the bottom line. Don't worry about it because all of those are specializations that you start to kind of work your way into, even if you want to or don't want to. In your junior, senior years, it's like 1, 2, maybe 3 classes. So enjoy this conversation, learn more about the possibilities of what you can do with a chemical engineering degree. And let's see if you're going to do that, you want to make sure you list that down as your first choice major on the application. It doesn't matter which one, just go ahead and put that down. Let's get out of the way and hand it over to our faculty in the Mork Family Department of Chemical Engineering and Material Science. All right. Well, welcome to the USC Viterbi School of Engineering Faculty Roundtable discussion. Today's faculty roundtable discussion will be with the Mork Family Department of Chemical Engineering and Material Science. We have 3 fantastic faculty members that I'm going to let themselves introduce themselves to you in just a minute. But I'd like to welcome you. My name is Paul Ledesma. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission here at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering. A couple ground rules for today's event. We're going to be talking with our faculty members about the discipline of chemical engineering. We're going to talk about the curriculum, the program. We're going to talk about the undergraduate experience and some research in the area. And then we're also going to allow you to ask some questions. But for the time being, I'm going to ask you that you hold your questions. So you'll see that Q&A feature at the bottom. Please stay away from clicking that button. But we will, towards the second half of today's session, open up the question and answer session, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. So please hold your questions for the time being. And without further ado, we're going to let our faculty introduce themselves. We'll start because this is the order in which you showed up on my screen. I'm going to go first with Dr. Hodge, then Dr. Armani, then Dr. Zeno. Okay, so Dr. Hodge.
Hello and welcome. So I'm Professor Hodge. I am the chair of the department. I started my chairship about 2 months ago. But I've been at USC for 13 years, and I've been in Viterbi the whole time, obviously. And I am specifically a metallurgist, and I have both students from chemical engineering and material science in my group. And so I look forward to be able to chat with you and answer questions about the department and all the plans that we have for the future.
Thank you. Dr. Armani.
I'm Professor Andrea Armani. I've been here a year shorter than Professor Hodge, so I'm in my 12th year. And I work on nanomaterials for light emitting devices like lasers. And I have chemies and material scientists and electrical engineers in my group. So super happy to be here.
All right. Last but not least.
So I'm Professor Wade Zeno. I'm the newest professor in the department. I just joined 2 months ago. And my work specifically focuses on the biological aspect of engineering. So I engineer cells and use cell-derived materials to make new functional materials out of it.
Very cool. And it's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Zeno. You just started with us 2 months ago, and I haven't been on campus since March. So have you even been to campus yet?
Yeah, I'm in the process of setting up my lab now.
Oh, cool. Well, welcome. Long overdue. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm glad you could be here representing the department. Let's get started with a question that I think is on everyone's mind. The majority, we have prospective high school students in our audience, along with their parents, and also some transfer students in our audience. And the good majority of them, I would probably take a gander at all of them, have never taken a chemical engineering class. They've taken probably chemistry, and that's probably as far as we've got. So let's answer what seems like a simple question, but probably has a complex answer. I'd love to get everybody's input on this, which is, what the heck is chemical engineering?
Wait, do you want to get started?
Yeah, so I mean, the very simple definition of what is chemical engineering, it's using physical and life sciences. So like you guys have experience with chemistry, so using principles you learn from those science classes to basically produce and design new materials or energy sources. So it's a very broad field. There's a lot you can do, with it based on that definition alone.
I will add to that basically, because it is so broad, if everyone in here has already taken, let's say, a chemistry class, it's an applied chemistry, right? So it has that engineering component to it. And so we do a lot of the things that a chemist will do, but it's applied to a specific, like Professor Zeno said, for a specific function or a specific new material, or energy source. And so it's the engineering part here that is key and what makes it so different from just plain chemistry.
So I usually think about chemical engineering in terms of its chemistry roots. So if you think about chemists as maybe making, a single molecule of something, chemical engineers really figure out how to make that molecule useful. So like Professor Hodge said, to make it useful for a specific application, whether it's new batteries or a new therapeutic or a new way of detecting disease, but not only how to make it useful, but how to make a lot of it. So a chemist might be able to make one molecule, but a chemical engineer will be able to make a billion of it. So it's both how do you take a molecule and make it actually useful for society, but also how do you make enough of it so that it's actually useful for society? Because if you only have one, you can't do anything with that, right? You need a,
but love chemists.
Yes, right. So if you have one chemie, that's like, as good as like 1,000 chemists. It's why chemies get paid more. I just want to toss that out there.
Yeah, the pay range is different for chemical engineers than chemists.
Yeah.
I was wondering how far we would get into the session before we start dunking on chemistry, but it sounds like we're...
I mean, immediately.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we do a lot of chemistry, right? There's a lot of chemistry that happens in our department, even if you
in my group.
In material science, chemical engineering, and petroleum, we do. There's a lot of chemistry going on because that is, as it is basic, because we make materials. Most of us are synthesizing new materials. That's at the base of it. So the chemistry is at the base. So you do know, and people ask you, like, are you a chemist? No, we're in chemical engineering, and so the classes and the things like that, I think it would just be the applied chemistry. And that's what the curriculum shows as well, whenever we get to talk about it a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a nice transition then. Let's talk about the curriculum. What does it look like for a student going through the undergraduate curriculum in chemical engineering? What courses are they taking? There's a lot of different paths, right? A lot of different specializations and things in there. And I'll preface this for our audience, those specializations from a high school perspective are very confusing. Like, you're not supposed to have the answer before you start. We're just showing you what's available, and you'll make those decisions as you go through this coursework. So
yeah, well, I mean, there are some general classes that everyone has to take in the chemical engineering track. And then there's different emphasis depending on things that you may want to focus on, and we can get to those in a second. But the basic classes, which are about 50 to 60 units, basically make sure that you have a strong chemistry background, the engineering background, chemical processes, lots of labs. The labs are very different because they are applied labs, right? So right now, even though we are in this, what would I call it? Semi-virtual mode, all the students in the chemical engineering labs, they got kits at their home so they can follow along with the labs that are happening at USC. So they do it at the same time. We shipped everything at the beginning of the semester, so they can do it from things in their house to even look at reactions, flows. So all the labs, all the students are doing at their home with the kits that we send for them to do, to follow along. A lot of hands-on to try to and apply projects as well. And that's what makes the part of it engineering. I mean, we can go into more basic classes, but that is basically the core of it. And then we have some specializations, which vary depending on what the students want to do, whether it's environmental or biochemical or nanotechnology and petroleum. And so all it means, you still take the same core classes, but you may take, 2 or 3 or 4 classes in those specializations, or you can just take all in them in the basic chemical engineering. It just depends where you're, once you come here for the first 2 years, it looks almost exactly the same. And then it depends on what inspires you or what you decide, well, I like this better, or I like that. And so I had a student, a top student, actually, she's a 4.0 chemical engineering student that worked for me. And she's like, oh, I want to do nanotechnology specialization. And then about a year ago, she came back, she goes, actually, I changed my mind to environmental specialization. She's still a chemical engineer, and she's now working with a different group. She was in my group for about a year and a half as a research undergrad, and now she's in another group, and that's great. That's what you're here for.
Dr. Armani, you've had a lot of experience in teaching our undergraduate courses. Can you talk about some of the courses that you've taught?
Yeah. So the 2 main courses I've taught are Engineering Academy, which is a first-year undergrad course, and almost all first-year undergrads take it. It's kind of a blend of introduction to engineering, what all the different engineering degree programs are, to make sure that a student coming in, they actually are choosing the right major for them, just like this conversation right here. A lot of times the student will sign up for electrical engineering and realize they actually want to be a mechanical engineer, or they sign up for biomedical and realize they really want to be a chemical engineer. So we go through kind of all the different degree programs. We do a lot of project-based learning in that class. And then the other class I teach in the spring is a nanomaterials class. So it's a lab class, and it's for juniors and seniors. It's actually part of the nano emphasis that Professor Hodge's student is no longer a part of. So I'm super sad. But that class is a blend of chemical engineers and mechanical engineers. So it's a very interesting class to teach because you have these 2 students with 2 very different backgrounds. But they're doing labs together, so they really end up teaching each other, as well as learning the material kind of on their own. So it's a really great learning environment for them. And then I've also taught some ad hoc classes. So we taught one class with a faculty member from Keck as well as Dornsife, where the undergrads actually designed and then built microscopes from scratch, which was a lot of fun. So that was kind of in place of a capstone class for the biomedical engineering department. So there's a lot of really cool classes taught for engineering students, so they can really kind of stretch their minds and learn new things out of the textbook.
You mentioned nanomaterials and nanotechnology, and these are exciting words for a lot of our students as they kind of come into the college experience and they've read about it or they've heard about it, they're interested. Can we give a little bit of an overview on what exactly is nanotechnology? Sometimes students come to me and say, I want to major in nanotechnology. And I say, well, it doesn't really work that way. So can we help shed some light as to where the applications in nanotechnology are?
Yep.
So I think Andrea and I can both speak to it. We do different aspects of it,
yeah.
and then we will be more in the biomedical side. Biomedical, is that what? Yes. So Andrea, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, there are some schools that do have degrees in nanotechnology. So the question isn't totally out of the realm of possibility. However, the challenge with getting a degree in nanotechnology is it's not a well-established degree, right? So if you get a degree in it, it sounds super awesome and flashy right now, but it's kind of like the red the red sports car. It's great right now, but 5 years from now, you're going to want the next red sports car, not the one you have today. Whereas it's your college degree, right? Like you want a college degree that's going to be good and exciting today and good and exciting 10 years from now, not just today. And nanotechnology is a super exciting field that you can get access to from pretty much every single degree in engineering. So you can get access to making new types of nanomaterials from chemical engineering. You can get access to making new types of nano devices from electrical engineering. You can program the nano devices from computer science. You can test the behavior of the nanomaterials from mechanical engineering and material science or civil engineering. So it really depends on what aspect of nanotechnology you're excited about. And that's really kind of something that gets to the class I teach the first semester, is trying to figure out like what aspect of engineering really inspires a person, right? Is it the mechanical properties? Is it the chemistry? Is it the biology and the biochemistry? And that kind of helps direct what degree program they should be in, which kind of sets the foundation for the rest of their life, right? Like what launching pad are they excited to be on?
So I will add to that for in the specific phase of nano. And so this speaks to having one of the base degrees. So base degrees would be like civil, mechanical, chemical engineering, and then with different emphasis. So my group works in nano as well, but in different, we synthesize things. So we make things from the atoms up, but they actually film. So they can be thick enough for you to hold, or like satellites, mirrors for windows for space exploration. But all the reason that they behave so well is because it starts with the nanotechnology. So that's what we do. We grow things from atom by atom, but we make them large enough so they can be used for these applications. And actually, I just had 2 students that graduated. One went to Intel to make microchips, and the other one went to Airspace Corporation to make, again, these are the windows for the next space shuttle. So, but it is based on nanotechnology. So the size nano is pretty small. I always tell people, start with a micron. So everybody, almost everybody here will have some hair, or somebody that has some hair. So if one of your hairs is about 20 microns thick, that's 20,000 nanos. So again, if you can see it, that's not true because you can't see it with your naked eye, but you can see your hair. And so just imagine that's already 20,000 nanos. So it's quite small. And so by doing atoms by atoms, you really can then grow it and then tailor the properties and the behavior of the material.
That was great. Dr. Zeno, did you want to add anything in?
Yeah, so like I said, I work in the biological side of chemical engineering. So with nano experience in my lab, I guess my approach isn't the same as Professor Hodge's approach, which he starts from atomistic and works her way up. But I start with biological systems. So I could take different components of these biological systems and combine them such that they assemble on their own into nanostructures. So you can make these different types of functional nanostructures that can be used for things like delivering drugs and therapeutics. Is one example of the types of applications you'd have with these type of nanomaterials I make in my lab.
That's great. I'm interested, it's probably a little unfair of us to ask you more about the USC experience, being that you've been here for 2 months, but can you tell us a bit more of your background of where you were before this and what made you come over to join us here at USC?
Right. So I'm a chemical engineer by training. All my degrees are in chemical engineering, my bachelor's degree, my PhD. Graduated from UC Davis in Northern California several years ago, then did a postdoc in Texas at the University of Texas, Austin. And, I like California a lot, so I had to come back. Now I'm here in Los Angeles. USC is a really beautiful campus, a lot of great professors to collaborate with, at the forefront of, the research endeavors, and, just a really good place to be to really flourish as a research professor. So.
And how are you adjusting back to California?
I haven't skipped a beat. It's just the way it was when I left it. Good.
Let's talk a little bit more about research. That's a great conversation topic. Can we talk a little bit more about either research specifically that you're working on across the 3 of you, or also research in the department more as broader strokes?
So I would like to speak with my chair hat. of the broader department, and specifically what some of our chemical engineer faculty are doing. And I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of it because probably I won't do a good job, but also because it's really good to have a global perspective of what they're doing. So we have people working on from vaccines, right, to kind of petroleum systems. So it's really a wide range of what people are working on: drug delivery, catalysis, energy conversion, sustainability. So all those aspects have a chemical engineering background on it. So really a wide range. And they are the faculty in chemical engineering, focusing on more on the drug delivery aspect, or whether they're doing vaccine development, or whether they're doing more traditional chemical engineering things like catalysis of energy. They excel at their field, and they work together with other faculty to come up with new processes or new materials in order to really excel at the engineering part of chemical engineering. In respect to my research, mine is really synthesis, but it's more in the very mechanical engineering oriented. So structures that are strong and light for space exploration, for corrosion resistance. And we always have lots of undergrads in our lab, and we enjoy having them quite a bit. Sometimes as many as 5, not as many as Professor Armani, but quite a few undergrads really, really good doing research in the labs.
So I have a lot of undergrads in my lab. So right now I have 9. So I have like a little pod of them. So I really like having undergrad researchers in the lab. So usually a research lab, just for those who aren't familiar with research labs, because I wasn't when I was in high school. Usually a research lab is comprised of PhD students, so people who are working towards getting their PhD, as well as postdoctoral scholars who are researchers who already have their PhD, so they're already doctors, and they're working towards either becoming professors or maybe moving on to somewhere, a position in a national lab or something like that. And then there can also be undergrad researchers as well as high school students. So I often have 1 or 2 high school students in the lab as well. So my lab typically has somewhere between 9 to 12 high school or undergrad students in it. I didn't take any new undergrads this year, which is why I'm at 9 and not 12. But yeah, I really like undergrads. I think all of you add a certain amount of enthusiasm and also fearlessness to doing research because you aren't afraid to fail, which is actually an advantage over students who are afraid to fail, which actually means they become afraid to try. So not being afraid to fail is an important skill set.
Dr. Zeno, would you like to add anything onto that? Related to you already kind of touched on your research, but is there anything else you wanted to go in detail
on? Nothing in particular, but I definitely agree with that mindset from Professor Armani that not being afraid to fail is really how you make those breakthrough discoveries and really, push what you're capable of.
I wanted to add to that I think what I see makes a huge difference is that you have all these great peers. So the other undergrads, right, that will push you, and they are so good. And I have people from other universities say like, oh, you grad student, you PhD student. I'm like, that's my undergrad. That's not my grad student. And or people ask me like, oh, can you grad student train us over there at UC Irvine or something? I'm like, that's a sophomore. But they're that good. And I think that really helps to excel and drive you to do even better. And this hands-on aspect, Viterbi is really big on having undergraduate students participate in research. And that's what all of us, and I'm sure Wade will as well, host a lot of undergraduates in our lab. When I first started many years ago as an assistant professor, I actually had 1 PhD student and 7 undergrads. So they were, I raised my hand and said, does anybody know how to take about cards and take them apart and put them together? And I was like, you hire. And then they came and they did all sorts of things and develop all sorts of new systems and materials. And so, it's a really great place for them to learn hands-on. And the peers is very important because your peers will drive you to be the best engineer that you can be.
all really, really helpful. I apologize. My dog is going nuts outside. If everybody can hear all the barking, I'll try to mute myself whenever I'm not talking. So let's talk about outcomes. After a student goes through our undergraduate program, they have lots of opportunities. What types of companies do they go on to work for? A number of them also go on to grad school. So where do we see them going? Anecdotally, any information that you all have?
I have peers that work in a variety of different places, from different pharmaceutical or biotech companies, places like Bayer Pharmaceuticals, what's the name, the big biotech company in San Francisco, Genentech, places like that, or even on the non-bio side, working in places like Chevron or Exxon Mobil, or working for even companies like the company that makes Intel, for example. So since I said it's a really broad discipline, there's a lot of different ways you can end up going, and those are just the name of some really big companies that some of my colleagues ended up working for after we graduated.
I will say that a lot of the students also can go into environmental aspects of this, waste management and water management, not in the civil side, but in the chemical engineering side. Those are all processes, how to keep water clean, how to manage sewage, how to manage pH and things like that in different kinds of liquid medium or even solid medium. What is the next microbe that cleans water or things like that. So I've seen a lot of students go more into the environmental side or working on solar cells, things like that. A lot of things to do with sustainability.
So actually, one of my former students works for South Coast Water, doing water testing to make sure that our water is clean. So water is definitely, in the environment, is definitely one of the career paths. But then also, obviously, our undergrads also go on to PhD programs, master's programs, MDs. I've had one that went to law school. Yay, patent law. Really hoping she comes back. So they've gone on to all different career paths.
Yeah. I had a colleague that went into environmental law with their chemical engineering degree.
Yeah.
And like Andrea said, I had one student probably from 8 years ago, and he went to the MD PhD program at Johns Hopkins. So
I think that's the one lesson, and that in doing all these faculty department roundtable discussions, there's been a lot of questions about I want to do X, what's the best path to get to that point? And the answer is there's never one path. And these undergraduate degrees, to borrow your phrase, Dr. Armani, this level of trend or anything else, the reliability of the undergraduate degree in engineering, any engineering degree, but even chemical engineering, has its applications in a lot of industries. We just mentioned pharmaceutical industries, energy industries, the environmental and sustainable elements as well, materials, all of these things. There's not an industry out there that isn't supported at some level by chemical engineers, and that's important to understand. So it's really more about, are the topics that these faculty are talking about, are they interesting to you? Because if they're interesting, if you're enjoying hearing about them, then you're likely going to enjoy studying and working on these projects. It's not about this end goal. So recognize there's no clear answer to those questions of end goal. Please hold your questions for just a little while longer. I got just a couple more questions for our faculty, then we're going to turn it over to our audience. The last, actually, no, I have one more question, and this is gonna be a fun question for you. This is a question.
What's your favorite chemical?
Well, it proves we're talking to the chemical engineering faculty. That's their definition of a fun a fun question. No, if you weren't a faculty member right now, if you weren't a professor, what would your younger self had really hoped you'd be doing right now professionally?
Like what age?
Well, now I want to hear the answers. What are the answers for 6, 8, 12? Does that, you have different answers?
Yeah. I mean, what I wanted to do when I was 6 is definitely not what I wanted to do when I was 14. Like those are very.
Give them to me. Well, let's start with 6. Let's start with 6.
Okay, so that was astronaut age. 6 was definitely astronaut age. And then when I was 10, I was still astronaut / scientist. But then I went through a phase when I was around 13, when I decided I wanted to be a musician, because a lot of people go through that phase. And then I reverted back to being a scientist.
And what would you play?
Flute.
Flute. Got
Yeah.
it. Awesome. Rock
No,
concert.
not like drums or something. No.
Dr. Zeno, you got any thoughts on this in your younger self?
I probably would have wanted to be a musician. I'll give you guys a little tour of this room I'm in right now, but this is kind of also my music room.
Oh,
kind of keep up
wow.
with that. I have all my guitars. And
Wow.
So
wow.
yeah, so music
Now
is
we know who's
something
going
that
to
I've
play
always,
at the holiday party.
yeah.
Yeah.
You are burying the headline with your camera angle right now, man. Like
Yeah.
you got to flip that desk around. That is I was gonna bring up the like rate my room. Like I was gonna say we have got some really nice setups here. I mean, both Dr. Hodge and I are cheating with our backgrounds, but Dr.
Yeah.
Armani and Dr. Zeno, look at some great angles here, lots
Yeah.
of different patterns. But I was gonna say, Dr. Zeno, if you just flip that around, those guitars would have been an automatic win.
I don't know. I have a kitten. If he shows up, I win, like hands down.
Yeah,
He's
no,
like this big.
I was
I
gonna
have
say,
a kid too, so
I've been seeing the Twitter photos
Yeah.
of these cats. So I was hoping
Yeah.
for one to have that little sneak peek appearance over your shoulder there.
Yeah.
so musician. Okay, now we know. So for me, then it sounds pretty lame. So when I was much younger, I wanted to be a nun. And yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then
I did
wanted-
not.
you
Yeah.
see?
Didn't see that coming either.
I did not see that coming. Wow.
And then I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write poetry like Pablo Neruda for a long time. And then I think it was my switch to the US because I didn't speak English as a teenager, that it was really hard to write and, just learn in English. I switched and the math didn't change. And then after that, I decided I was going to be some kind of engineer.
Okay.
And I stuck with that. And, somebody asked me recently, what if you were 18 again, what would you choose? And I would choose this. This fits me like a glove. It's like applied sciences that fits me like a glove. It's the perfect. I'm like, I think whoever came up with it is the perfect career.
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to be anything else but an engineer?
Now I have a follow-up question for you, Dr. Is your daughter more like you, wanting to be a nun, or more like your current you, going in the engineering route, or something entirely different?
She wants to be a marine biologist.
Okay, so we're leaning on this side. Okay.
Yeah.
Very
No, she
cool.
would be like, no. But I went to all-girl Catholic school all the time, and so that seemed like a really good career.
I did too, but I didn't want to be a nun.
I was, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Indoctrination in different ways.
Yeah. That did not come.
Yeah, people are always surprised when I say that. They're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, yep.
It's
Yeah.
super fun. All right. Well, so for all of you guests, thank you for being patient. Go ahead and lay those questions into our session. I'm going to do my best to moderate these questions and discussion as best we can. A few of them have already come in, so just give me a second here as I kind of go through them a little bit. Some of you, we have some of our staff that are in the background as well. Keep in mind, we will not be answering any admission questions today. So no admission or application questions. We have our faculty here. Let's focus on the discipline, on everything we've been talking about today. If you have questions about admission or the application process, we have info sessions going on 3 times a week, 2 for first-year students, 1 for transfer students. Go to viterbi.live/events. I think one of our staff can put that link into our chat session so you can get a link to that and register for info sessions. One is as early as tomorrow at the same time at 4 o'clock. So some of these we already answered. So Sohaib, we basically did talk about the professions and the careers. We did go into that. And then let's see what we got here. Here's a good question from Henry. The specialized chemical engineering major, do they require more work? Were you worried about work, Henry? You're in the wrong discipline here, man. 'Cause they're all going to be a lot of work. And also it's not about more work. It's just that you specialize your course load. You choose certain courses toward that specific area. But go ahead, Dr. Armani.
I was gonna say, so I think I understand what he's asking because I'm having this discussion a lot with my first year undergrad students right now, right? So it's not that the specialized engineering majors require like a ton more classes, because within the engineering degree, you have to take a certain number of technical electives to get the engineering degree. So the specialized engineering majors kind of leverage those technical electives and they focus it. So instead of getting a chemical engineering degree with, a certain scattered number of technical electives that you could take one technical elective in computer science and one in BME class and maybe one in chemical engineering, you're taking and consolidating all of those technical electives around a theme. and then maybe you have one additional in order to complete that special emphasis. So it isn't as though you need to take all of your chemical engineering classes and then a whole nother set of technical electives. It's really leveraging your degree requirements in order to like have more of a focused chemical engineering degree around an emphasis than it is getting a totally different degree. Yeah. And yes, people do double major and get an emphasis, because I counseled an undergrad through that this morning on how they're going to work out their course schedule.
So that was a very good answer by Professor Armani. And so the number of units does not change. It is really those electives that you have to take anyway. They will give you a group that you can take to emphasize a specific area, or you can just scatter them. And then, because maybe you're interested in a lot of things, it's still fine, because your core base of chemical engineering classes are the same.
That's great. I want to add on to that, where it says, can I double major? And this is what I tend to see in these questions. The reason that you might be asking that, Henry, is because you're thinking, well, I can't choose, so I'm going to double major in both of these specializations, and you won't. And you won't do that. This is something that you'll discover as you go through our courses. You're going to start to lean into some and lean away from others. So this process of going through your undergraduate engineering program and where you're going to end up with your undergraduate degree, it's an experiential process. It's not something you plot out ahead of time. And what's weird about that is that most prospective engineering students think that you can plot out everything ahead of time. And this process of going through coursework and kind of what you're going to like and what you dislike, that's going to happen, and you're going to enjoy this. And also, your undergraduate degree is not your terminal degree. That's the beginning of your educational path that will continue to evolve through experiential processes. So pick an area to start. That's all we're talking about. Pick an area to start, and all of the chemical engineering areas start with the same introduction to chemical engineering class that kind of walks you through these processes, and we're going to be with you to help you. Okay.
But I mean, keep in mind, like, a lot of people do double major, so I wouldn't say like he's definitely not going to double major.
No,
like,
I meant he's not going to double. No, I meant he's not going to double major. I'm not going to double major in chemical engineering, nanotechnology, and chemical engineering polymers materials.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, because that's usually what the question I get. It's like, oh, can I double major between these? And I would encourage you, when you're thinking about double majors, to be disparate. Think about something else that you can incorporate into that your undergraduate years. It's not about not double majoring. It's more about inside these areas, because they tend to think like, well, if I can't choose, I'll do both.
Yeah, no, but there's more than enough space to double major.
Absolutely.
Your first year will really answer a lot of these questions as you take some of the introduction classes to the major. I think you will see like, oh, wow, this was a mishit, or this is really speaking to me. And then pairing them up with maybe some research opportunities, really kind of balance that out to let you know kind of what you want. I always told the undergrads, this is the time to figure out what you really love. And so sometimes is the first thing you like, sometimes it may be the second or third thing that you try. You're here to try different labs and try different, emphasis, even if you want, like I said, my student, the switch from nano to environmental is all good. The thing is, this is the time to figure it out. And you after that first year, you really have much more knowledge for you to pick where you want to go.
Thank you for that. We have a question that Ashish is asking here. Is asking about the future of chemical engineering. He's putting a timeline in 20 years. I'll just say in general, what's the future of chemical engineering looking like?
Wow. Well, I think it goes like with all engineering. I think medicine is always going to be a large part of it, right? As long as there's humans involved, I think that's going to be something that as we progress and as people live longer, kind of like improving people's lives through medicine, right? So I think that's going to be a big field of it. I think energy as well, not necessarily fossil fuels, but energy, renewable energy, chemical reactions to make, cleaner water, desalination process, many different things. I mean, the thing is that when you look at chemical engineering, you're looking at the very basic core of life, right? So health, water, sun, energy, food. I mean, so that you can't really, you can live without a car. Can you live without food? Can you live without water? Can you live without energy? So since it is such a fundamental base to all these things, it will be difficult to say, obviously EU will evolve with the time, but it's at the core of this. What do you think, Wei?
I agree with that completely. The very fundamental in terms of all these different applications. I was gonna, I guess, weigh in on the biological engineering aspect. Like that wasn't, I guess, traditionally a part of engineering or chemical engineering many years ago, and it's only since in the last 10, 20 years or so it became a really big part of chemical engineering, and that's on the upward trajectory and probably gonna become a really big part of chemical engineering 20 years from now, like we said, specifically with medicine and therapeutic research.
Talk a little bit more about research. We have a lot of questions relating to research, and so I'm trying to summarize across a number of them. But how would an undergraduate get involved in research, and then what does what is research? Let's say I just got a position in your life. What am I doing? And I know this isn't the same for everybody, but what is it like?
Wow, it depends on the group. And so let's start with the first questions. Where do you get involved? So some people, like Professor Armani, she's really good at posting it on her website. I don't really post it on my website, so it's more like word of mouth or a class that I teach. But there's also in my BTurby, there's already a list of faculty who are looking for undergraduate students. So if you want to match up with that, so there's a database. I did sign up to that database, looking for undergraduate students. And then, what is research? Again, it depends. For my group, people say, oh, do I need to have X classes or whatever? And so my group is an experimental group. I said, if you're willing and if you respect chemicals, we're good. Don't drink any of the chemicals, we're good. And we'll train you. Well, we have some very bad chemicals. Yeah. So we train them. So I have actually a lot of the students that start in my group, they start as freshmen. They start in their second semester, and then we just train them. We will say, can you look at this project, working with this PhD student, this is a synthesis, or this is another project in which you do testing, and so they kind of pick, and then they go with it. At the end, they're running like a sub part of a PhD thesis on their own, depending how long they stay. So again, it depends on the group. For an experimental group, at least in my group, they don't have to have any experience. They just have to be willing, and have a good attitude, and that's like 90% of it. And then the rest we will teach them.
So experience and or coursework doesn't really make much sense, because anything that's being done in a research group isn't going to be something you're going to learn in a class anyway. So there isn't necessarily a prereq for doing research in a lab. You're going to be taught what you need to know in the lab by the PI in the lab, or by their PhD students. As far as what it is like, as Professor Hodge said, that's very dependent on the lab. Some labs are experimentalists. So my lab is kind of like the classic lab you might see in a movie with fume hoods and chemicals and beakers, but we also have a laser lab with lasers. Lasers, everyone likes that. And then there's also like the computational labs where it looks like a computer lab with a bunch of large computer screens. So it really depends on what type of lab you actually end up joining. But I mean, the big thing is there are, as I'm sure Paul can send a link, there are a lot of undergrad research opportunities to support funding of undergrad research.
Absolutely. I mean, just so that everyone knows, as part of our application process, this is all part of our scholarship consideration process. We award some scholarships to be research scholars through the incoming process. Yep. But the grand majority of our students doing research are not actually part of that system. They're just, when they get involved as undergrads, getting involved in this way, talking to faculty members, finding paid positions, and then now a brand new large undergraduate research program called CURVE, the Center for Undergraduate Research at Viterbi Engineering. I think we forced an acronym in there. Is brand new funding for our current undergraduates and matching systems to find this process. I mean, bottom line, we want undergraduates involved in labs. We put our money behind that to do that. So it's a great opportunity, and this is across the disciplines. And there's another question about interdisciplinary research. I think at its core, research is almost always interdisciplinary. It's not like a single silo of research. Can we talk about that?
I was going to say Wade should talk about it, because his is like the epitome of that.
Yeah, mine's very interdisciplinary. Especially with how involved in biology my work is. I'm definitely plan to collaborate with a ton of different professors and Dorn's Scythe. In just in my personal experience before USC, I've collaborated across multiple departments before. Like my most recent project at my last institute, I was collaborating with chemistry and with also with biochemistry department as well to to really get that well-rounded approach to the type of work I was doing then. So collaboration is very key to research, especially the type of work I do.
This is great. Thank you. I want to shift the focus a little bit. Abby asked this question. I want to thank them for their question. In your undergraduate or graduate years, how did you motivate yourself to get through difficult engineering classes or just different difficult classes? Let's talk about that. And any tips on how to keep up your self-confidence and deal with imposter syndrome?
Ooh, I had lots of that. Well, actually, I didn't have imposter syndrome to graduate school. In the undergraduate, I was still learning English, so I kind of didn't really notice that it was happening. I think I was really so at the beginning, because you're taking kind of like these core classes, physics and chemistry and math, but I couldn't wait because that wasn't my major yet. I wanted to take the engineering classes. So at the beginning, I think that had me all pumped up. I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to take finally some engineering classes. I think that kept me going at the beginning. And then the difficult classes, it wasn't so much that it was hard. It was just like the classes that I didn't find so interesting. The hard classes, you just had to put a lot of time in, but I really hated engineering economics. And that was really hard for me to get to it. I was just like, oh, how can I just get a B? And so it was really a struggle with myself. And I just had to remind myself that that was part of what I needed to complete to get my engineering degree. So it wasn't so much, there were obviously hard classes, and physics took, I think, half my life as a freshman to study physics, but it was mostly like the classes that maybe were not so interesting to me, that those were the hard to get through. I think that was it.
So I would say it was both the friends I made. So my friends in my classes who formed a really good support network. And obviously I contributed to the support network, but we supported each other. And then also the research group I was in. So I had an amazing PhD student mentor when I was an undergrad. And so when I was taking a class that I was like, this class is completely useless, I will never use this ever in the rest of my life. And he's like, well, fine, don't worry about it. He's like, come in, the only way that you're going to be able to keep doing research in the lab is if you are, still majoring. So you have to get through this class in order to still do research. And I loved doing research, and I would have put up with almost anything to be able to still do research in the lab and still get to work with him. So having him as in my corner, constantly motivating me, and then having a really good group of friends, who were just always there and had my back, really helped kind of push through a lot of different, issues with classes that I thought were totally pointless, as well as just other imposter syndrome things. And keep in mind, imposter syndrome, that doesn't go away. I want to tell you it goes away, but it doesn't. It's something you learn how to cope with. It's not something that you overcome like strep throat.
Yeah, there are two types of people out there: people who have experienced imposter syndrome and liars. Like everyone has dealt with imposter syndrome and deals with it to some degree continually.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that. I think if anybody doesn't experience imposter syndrome, it's probably because they're not any good at it in the first place. The ones that are good are the ones that always feel that way. The ones that have this amazing confidence with no skill set to back it up. The ones that don't experience imposter syndrome.
There's actually a paper on that, and that is true.
There you go. I like this question. I'm going to read it verbatim. This might be a bit of a silly question, but do researchers at Viterbi have some sort of huzzah moment when something new is discovered or when a huge breakthrough is achieved? I'm assuming that's a eureka moment is what we're getting to. You ever had that moment where you run out of the lab?
Well, it has happened. It has happened a couple of times, but it doesn't happen all the time. Most of the time, the machine is broken. And so maybe I think what happens more regularly in my lab, so we use a lot of vacuum chambers. I think more this huzzah moment is like, wow, we found the leak and now we have a vacuum.
Yeah, so sometimes this is our moments when you don't expect it, like when you're looking at the data and you're like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't what I was expecting. And then you're like, wait a minute. And then you realize, your hypothesis might not have been accurate. And you get this new interpretation and realize you're onto something new. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I think this is like a perfect example of when like imposter syndrome kicks in, is because you're looking at your data and you're like, oh, I think this is what's going on. Now I need to reproduce it 5,000 times because I can't possibly be right.
Yeah.
And then you just start reproducing it as many times as you possibly can. So because you don't believe your own data.
So
yes.
That was great. There's a question that was here earlier, and I'm going to bring it back up because we dunked on chemistry pretty early in this. And so someone kind of challenged back at us, and I don't remember what the question was. And they said, so I'm going to bring the fight to y'all, and don't kill the messenger. They said, so I hear that chemical engineering is barely chemistry.
I didn't say that.
No. Someone said,
Okay.
hey, I've heard that chemical engineers are barely chemists, or they've done barely chemistry. How do we respond to that? And also, I think there actually is another serious question in here, which is, how does that curriculum differ from if you study chemistry versus chemical engineering?
I think Wade should handle this one.
Wade, it's all yours.
Well, like we said in the beginning, we made a distinction that there's two ends of the spectrum: the fundamental, like discovery part, and the actually applying it part. Chemical engineering is really heavily on that application side of it, whereas chemistry is on that fundamental kind of making discovery, like Professor Hodge was saying earlier, making the single molecule, or sorry, Professor Armani was saying earlier, make the single molecule. Like, we're really about that scale up and applying those principles. So, you have to have a basic understanding of chemistry in order to scale it up and apply it. So, that's the clear distinction there. So, I mean, you can say chemical engineers are barely chemists, but I mean, by that same logic, you can say chemists are barely engineers, like, because we're just on different ends of how we handle technology.
And again, it will depend on the group. Like if you want to do research, it will depend on the group. So in my group is mixed. So sometimes my group looks like a physics group, sometimes it looks like a chemistry group, and sometimes it looks like engineering. And so it just depends on what project or what problem we're working on. And so, I mean, I have a colleague from chemistry who I like very much, Richard Rucci, and I have as many chemicals as he does. So, and he's like, why do you have all this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. Why do you have more? And so it just really depends on what you do. We mostly use it for like etching and solving and coatings and corrosion studies. But, so it just really depends on what you're looking at. I would say, even without being a chemical engineer, and I do a lot of chemistry in a week-to-week basis in my group, lots and lots of chemistry. So again, it depends on the group. Maybe a computational group wouldn't do as much, but maybe they're more in the chemistry base. So it just kind of depends, but it's definitely the base there. And again, the apply part, that's very much what differentiates it for the engineering. There's a purpose to it of like a final product.
Yeah, from a curricular standpoint, I think it's important to note that a chemical engineer takes almost all the same classes that a chemistry major is going to take. I mean, chemistry, analytical chemistry, physical chemistry, organic chemistry, and then all the same math, if not more math. And then there's the application, which is what you were all talking about. And that reminds me of the von Karman quote that our dean likes to mention all the time. The difference between, I'm butchering it and paraphrasing here, but the difference between science and engineering is science is about discovery and engineering is about creating that which hasn't been invented yet. And so do we feel that that's a nice kind of parallel to this discussion?
Yeah. And I wanted to follow up. So basically the main differences between a chemistry and chemical engineering is chemistry, they take 2 semesters of organic chemistry and chemical engineering. The second semester of organic chemistry is optional. It can satisfy technical elective if you want to take it. In chemical engineering, you don't have to take inorganic chemistry. Inorganic chemistry is synthesis of inorganic materials. I'm sure a lot of Andrea Hodge's students have taken inorganic chemistry based on the type of chemistry she does in her group. Usually you'll take physical chemistry, which is basically quantum mechanics in both. You take analytical chemistry in both. You take general chemistry in both. So they have very similar curriculum. The difference, you take thermodynamics in the chemistry department if you're a chemist, you take thermodynamics in the chemical engineering department if you're a chemical engineer. They have, obviously it's thermodynamics, you're going to learn the same equations. There aren't special equations because it's math. But in the chemistry department, you focus mainly on the application of the math to gases, whereas in the chemical engineering department, you focus on the application of the equations to things like engines. So why does an engine work? So it's slightly different applications of the same equations. That's a big picture rundown. I double majored in chemistry, so I'm fluent in that
Yeah.
curriculum.
Yeah, when I was, obviously I didn't go to undergrad here at USC, but back when I was undergrad, I was 2 classes shy of having a double major in chemistry, and I was wondering how common is that here at USC for undergrad curriculum?
Probably
It's
pretty
very common. Yeah.
But the curriculum already has a lot of units, so a lot of
Yeah.
people say, well, no. I mean, when I graduated, I was 1 class away from the double major in math because that's where I decided to do my emphasis. And then they said I had to take linear algebra, so I said no.
What? Linear algebra, that's a great class.
I hate linear
I
algebra.
like linear algebra.
Yeah.
I thought it was the best math class.
I love
really
calculus and calculus and differential equations and complex analysis, but linear algebra, nope, thank you.
I have a feeling Paul's about to like try to rein us back in
Okay,
to
sorry.
like answer questions. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, when we get deep on math questions and upper division math courses, this is where it gets really exciting. So.
Yeah. We're all very passionate about our favorite math class.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. I have one final question for you because I do want to be respectful of your time and start wrapping up here. And that is, what differentiates the chemical engineering program at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering from other great programs that our students are thinking about and applying to?
Well, I will start again with my chair hat. Well, the fact is that we are a department with 3 big emphasis. So it's chemical engineering, material science, and petroleum. So that really gives you the opportunity to have this hands-on research experience with faculty in that department that may not necessarily be in just a chemical engineering department. I also think there is a wide range of applications that the faculty is looking at. And now with this, the new Center for MCB, what is the Michelson Center for
Convergent biosciences.
Convergent bioscience, and then the closeness to KEG, the hospitals at USC, and the it really gives you an opportunity to have a very hands-on, deep understanding of what the field means before you graduate.
So I would add on to that. When I was in Wade's shoes, 12 years ago, and I was looking at schools, one of the key deciding factors that really drove me to USC is the fact that the School of Engineering is really like its own mini school. So it's very close and tight knit, but it's located in this much larger ecosystem. So when you look at USC from like 30,000 feet, it actually has all of these other schools. So there's a dentistry school and a cinema school and a communication school and a fabulous business school. And as an undergrad, you can take classes in all of these other schools. So the ability to have a fabulous chemical engineering degree, but then go take a class in cinema at the top ranked cinema school in the United States, that's an incredible opportunity. So that I would say, yes, our chemical engineering department is amazing, but then the ability to go take a cinema class, that just kind of takes your undergrad experience to like the next level. And as a faculty member, I have access to those faculty as collaborators, and it takes my ability to run a research program to the next level. So all of us end up just working together to have this really rich learning environment. So that's why I love USC. It's been amazing.
Dr. Zeno, any other thoughts?
I agree with Professor Armani's statement there. Like, that's one of the things that really attracted me to USC when I first got here, just the physical layout of the campus, and said how all the engineering buildings, like you have the whole engineering quad there, and all the buildings just so close knit and really easy to collaborate and deal with all the departments.
I will finish that with, one of the main reasons I came to USC was because of the students. And so the students for me would be my students, but it would be your peers. And it was just, my first student at USC was a Rhodes Scholar. So it was a really high note because there's the only USC student that I knew from before that I recruited to work in my group. And I knew him from before working for me at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And so the students have been amazing. And so those are the kind of colleagues and peers that you will have, and very driven and with lots of different interests and many different clubs and many different things. So I always say that, and I can say my best friend is a faculty at MIT. I said, it's like the MIT students, but with a real life. And so they have all these other, all these other aspects to them. And so you grow not only as an engineer, but you also grow as a person because you're exposed to so much, again, given what the campus has to offer and everything going on. And so that to me was one of the main reasons I came to USC.
I'll add a summary point onto that as we wrap up. It's one of my favorite things to hear a chemical engineer say. I just got out of my thermodynamics class, but I'm going over to my stand-up comedy course next. I don't think you hear that at any other university. And my last point on that is I don't think at any other chemical engineering department or any other university would we get these 3 faculty members to take time out of their day to come speak to prospective students like yourself. It is a pleasure. I want to thank you all for spending this hour with us, Dr. Hodge, Dr. Armani, Dr. Zeno. Thank you very much for spending time with us. And for all of our guests that are out there, thank you for joining us for today's session. We got through as many questions as we could. If you have other questions, please join us at one of our admission information sessions, viterbi.live/events. And remember that the application is live right now for all of you that are seniors in high school to apply by December 1st for merit scholarship consideration. If you're a transfer student, get your application in by February 1st. More information is on our website at viterbiadmission.usc.edu. So with that, thank you all very much. Have a great evening. Fight on.
All right, welcome back. That was a fun episode. As Paul said, I think chemical engineering is something I've definitely misunderstood, in high school and even my first few years at Viterbi, because I think we think of it as like chemistry, but that's not true at all. Chemical engineering is much more than that. And I was someone who hated chemistry in high school. And now that I've kind of gone through, I've actually taken all my engineering classes. So I've gone through all of it. I've taken a few classes in the Mork Family Department of Chemical Engineering and Material Science, and they've been some of my favorites. So definitely, I think kind of an underrated major.
Absolutely. And I think the thing to take away from this episode is you're not getting yourself into one particular career path with a specific degree in chemical engineering, but you have the opportunity to do a lot of things. And your capabilities of what you're going to learn are applicable in a lot of industries. So keep that in mind. That passion for chemistry, that passion for problem solving, the passion for things at that kind of molecular level, it's all there for you. So keep that in mind as you go through this process. And as you start thinking about materials that you want to make, the applications for those materials are huge. I mean, just speaking to Audrey here, the ideas of, making new types of polymers, materials could likely have a strong emphasis. Maybe your industry that you work in is in aerospace, or is in the computer industry, or is in, the automobile industry, all of these things, or the construction industry. So keep in mind that some of these people think, oh, construction, that's civil engineering. Planes and modes of transportation, is aerospace. Space technology is astronautical engineering. And computers is computer scientists. Not necessarily. They're going to need these types of people all along the way, specifically when you're dealing with levels of energy and levels of new types of sustainable forms of energy. And that includes kind of phasing out of petroleum or new types of ways to think about petroleum engineering. So keep all that in mind. There's a lot here for you. And the other thing that I want to really point out to you, if you didn't notice, all of these faculty, and this is representative of the entire department, and I think really across the school, they love to work with you as undergrads. All of them work with undergrads. They have strong relationships with undergrads. And that's one of the defining points of the Viterbi School, and it has never been more present than in this conversation, as you heard, when students were talking about students that they had, students that they currently have, students that they want to see. They love the mentoring aspect of it. They're there to teach, and also they want you in their research labs. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. This wraps up all of our faculty roundtable discussions for the fall of 2020. And if you haven't gotten in your application, it's not too late yet. Just make sure you get your application in by January 15th. That is the final application deadline. Other than that, happy December, everybody. And we will see you on the next episode.